This video is not made for kids. It's designed to be suitable for all audiences, but quite frankly, the FTC scares me. So this video is an adult's perspective on Prodigy and a review from that perspective and for other adults and parents, but not necessarily parents. Hello and welcome back to another Prodigy review where I finally think I've gone and done it. I've remembered how to frame these shots. Anyway, yes, today episode 3, because the first episode was 1 and 2. It says episode 3 on Paramount Plus, so that's what I'm calling it. Not much to talk about before the episode where Jane Ray tells a bunch of kids about Starfleet. I don't know, these are short. I'm interested to see how they're gonna go. But it's not episode 1 anymore, which means I can front load you. I thought I would nail it. I could front load you with this right here. You should check out my Steven Universe project, which is another comedy. Well, this isn't a comedy, but a comedy, fun project with me and my partner doing a kid's show. So you're here, so that might interest you. Just open that in a new tab, and we can begin the review. Every single time I watch a new series, every time you think I'd learn, there's always a moment early on in episode 2 where I just sit back and go, oh yeah, episode 1 is the one where you gotta spice a little action, get people hooked, even though they're usually pretty standard. It's episode 2 where you do the slow intro. You gotta explain the world and the characters and the yada yada every time. But nah, this one had more than just that. But really, in Picard, you know, it was like that, where you had the explosive action, and then it was like, all right, now we gotta explain stuff. And this, it was like, oh yeah, here's how the replicators work, what the Federation is, this yada yada yada. But no, it did eventually get into different stuff. That being said, I think it was all right as an episode. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it. It was just kind of alright, which honestly is what most episode 2s are for some vaguely serialized structure. I think first, though, this episode is proof that the Protostar is going to be amazing for the fandom, where, you know, there's always a bit of the question in those later centuries, like, what the heck is this crew doing? The Enterprise D was the worst for it. Like, what the heck are all these random bridge stations doing? And, like, why do you need so many people to run a starship? This is the example of why you actually need that many people, because when you just have a bunch of idiots who don't know what they're doing running a starship, you know, when divert all power to shields actually screws like everything over. You know, I think it'll be great in that regard. But there were some bits, kind of the explanation, that were a little weird, because I know from Twitter, the head of Prodigy, I can't remember his name, like the Troll Hunters guy, I think it might be 2 people actually, but one of them is definitely like a big Star Trek nerd kind of guy, where you'll see him even give discussions. Basically, it's like my comment replies to comments on my videos, where like the one I saw most recently was, why is Discovery in that lineup of like Federation ships, isn't it secret? And he went on a big thing where like, well, actually no, because like this and from these shows. And before Prodigy came out, I remember he did a big thread of like the history of automation on Starfleet ships or something that was like a crazy kind of in-depth. So he's it's a guy who I trust knows his canon. Like the big one that, because the situation isn't messy enough, was in the Replicators, where it's like, you should know the Federation has abandoned traditional currency. And it's like, it's the classic Star Trek. It's like, well, no, because that's just humanity, and even then, it's kind of just Earth, and maybe the core planets, but not really the Federation, but also that Starfleet, which I'm not sure if they get paid, but maybe it's just the humans get paid, but also she did say traditional, and so maybe there's something a bit weird about Federation currency that would make sense, but also, it is kind of in the future. I mean, we've got Discovery, but this is after Lower Decks and Voyager, so maybe the whole Federation actually has abandoned money, but there was kind of a lot of those big, messy things. I am starting to think they won't just, like, there's just a Tellarite in the Delta Quadrant because, I don't know, it's kind of weird the way they're treating that. But we did get kind of set up to the Spore Drive, whatever the magic propulsion technology is. You know, warp core, magic propulsion system that lets them go to the Delta Quadrant, as the Ferengi would say. No, is that the... That's Steven Universe, that's the Ferengi. But I wonder actually if that might become a part of the show where eventually they get that to work, you know, their magic go anywhere drive. And then maybe they could send the Protostar people to like the Federation or the Gamma Quadrant or something. I'm not really sure what you'd gain. Maybe you could show a lot of Voyager aliens, because of course they did a huge distance through the Delta Quadrant. Maybe that's how you could... I don't know if you really want to do that, but judging by the red alert sound in this episode, I'm not sure they really... This isn't a Voyager nostalgia show, which is kind of weird, actually, because all the other shows seem to be really big on their Voyager references. I'm also kind of interested in the level of intelligence Janeway has. I almost kind of get the idea that she's kind of sitting there, it's like, I really regret my constant hatred of holographic rights. It's like, I knew I should have stood up for that Robert Picardo guy. Because she's almost got, like, Microsoft Clippy levels of intelligence in bits. Like, sure, they're cadets. She probably knows where they are, but then again, I guess she'd kind of expect to be in the Delta Quadrant. But there's other bits where she does seem kind of like smug and more like a doctor, where like, well, rather the doctor, where she's actually got like her personality. That is a thought though, in that she did kind of expect to be guiding a Federation crew from the Delta Quadrant back to the Federation. Apparently isn't surprised it's cadets, but it does raise the question of what actually happened to the Federation crew that was probably on board. Because my original expectation, or kind of guess if you remember, was they like zap the Protostar to the Delta Quadrant, experimental, NX ship, yada yada. But then, you know, you'd have holographic Janeway to guide kind of an autopilot back, just a return trip, which she doesn't really seem too capable of doing, as she can only do the basic ship's functions, which I guess doesn't include the gravity or anything. Maybe she was just showing off, I don't know. Yeah, basically, Janeway's a great choice for, like, navigating back from the Delta Quadrant, if anything went wrong. But, you know, ideally it'd just kind of be an autopilot back, and for whatever reason, that went wrong, and Prodigy happens now. I do find it a bit odd, though, that our main antagonist owns, like, a dreadnought mega starship that looks like a building and can turn invisible, with Chironite, or whatever it was, not dilithium, some sort of cloak, but he still wants the Protostar, presumably for its not spore drive, but, it's kind of like, I don't know, it looks like you got it pretty good to me. But this episode also set up a lot of, the crew's a lot more dysfunctional than I might have thought. And Dahl being kind of a very unwanted leader might be the word. I was going to say, I don't know why they're really going along with it, but I guess they are all kids. I'm not big on my playground politics, but I wouldn't have been even in elementary school. But I guess that I could kind of get it. But yeah, the sort of very dysfunctional crew eventually growing up to those Federation values, which I guess in coming back to the real world does kind of make sense, as your audience that needs this most is the children who do have that, I don't know, playground politics, if you want to call it, just kind of living in that world, and then bringing them up with the, how did Janeway put it? Like the strive to be better or something? Something like that. So I guess that makes sense from the real world perspective, but I didn't expect the crew to be quite so dysfunctional. And I did get a feeling, though, my partner and I argue over this a lot. This is the kind of arguments my relationship has, where there's a lot of sort of kid shows we'll like, and there'll be points where I'm critiquing the show, and they'll tell me, it's a kid show, go easy on them. And I always say, no, I will never accept that excuse. I will never accept that excuse, because there are so many great kid shows, and Prodigy is doing it as well, or at least claiming to, you know, too early to tell, of not talking down to your audience and not treating them as kids, or rather not treating them as idiots. And I will point to Steven Universe and say that is a show that did not treat its audience as kids at all, and created complex, detailed storylines that actually make sense and are cohesive and hinted at and planned out more than any other show I've seen. So, no, if you want to write a kid show and use the fact that it's a kid show as an excuse to be a lazy writer, then I'm gonna call you out for it. And so I felt this was gonna be a show where there might be a lot of those more moments where I could hear my partner sitting next to me going, "It's a kid's show, Nathan," and then starting the constant argument we have. Still fun to be had from the show, I'm sure. It's not like that's the massive deal breaker, but it's not gonna be the next Steven Universe for me. And unless this was like a way mega low for the series, and everything else is like god tier. Anyway, yeah, Prodigy's pretty quick. I think I'm just gonna get straight into the scene by scene, and I know I've got stuff to bring up during that. I don't have too much to say over the title sequence. I did see it. It was some promotional thing a while ago. They released it. Don't think I made a video on it, but I quite like it. It serves its purpose. It's a bit weird because I can't think of another kid show with an orchestral intro. Adventure Time adds little jingle. Steven Universe has We Are the Crystal Gems, which is absolutely fantastic. The Pokemon theme song, and even just random things from my childhood. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, was that instrumental? I think that was. I might have to, if it wasn't, I'm gonna put the text up over editing this. But yeah, there really aren't a lot of kids shows that don't have essentially jingles or really catchy, great songs, because that's what you want. Can you really see your like 5-year-old going like na 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 na, whatever the tune was? Like, no, but you still have people older than me going, "I want to be the very best," because it's like, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, at Star Trek, Faith of the Heart is controversial. I can kind of see why you might want to stick with orchestral soundtracks, but it's interesting. I'm realizing now I'm not going to be able to remember all my little critiques on explaining the Federation from just these thumbnails, am I? I did think Dalt's speech was a bit weird, but it was the great, they don't trust anyone. They're Delta Quadrant slaves from childhood. And so that makes sense. It was kind of, that whole talk about how people will always promise, the great life, but it's the great life for them, not for you. By the way, follow me, great life. I can't remember exactly what he did, but it's like, I know they're children, but is no one going to be like, hang on a minute? I don't even think Gwen did it. Gwen kind of did it, where he's like, he's good at talking, like, be dangerous if you listen, but you think she'd be smart enough to be like, didn't you just kind of say that that's what leaders always do? But I think Rock Talk was actually the one that they did really well. She had a lot of great moments, like in the mess hall where she just orders prison goop, and it's like, it's the only food I've ever eaten. Like, she was kind of almost uncomfortable, embarrassed about it, and almost kind of knew it was bad inside her, but didn't know what else to do. And Rock Talk had a lot of moments like that, of like, these are really young kids. I maybe guess a lot of them are supposed to be maybe above 10, but below teenager, maybe like 13, 14 for Dull and Gwen. But Rock Talk is 8. The voice actress is 8, actually. I'm pretty sure Rock Talk is also 8, but she's supposed to be a lot younger. And her scenes really set forth that, like, these are children who have known nothing but slavery in the mines their entire life. Because a lot of the episode is, more upbeat, especially compared to what's actually happening. And so I think those moments were great. Those were probably my favorite moments of the episode that really brought to the light, like, yeah, we're enjoying this, we're having fun, but there is a lot of trauma and bad stuff that has happened to these people. And these are kids. Like, these are just kids. Nothing more. And I like those bits. Here's something I appreciated for the kids. A white dwarf engulfing the red star was a very real thing in astronomy. And so it's a real small detail, but I like that, the kids will actually learn. There's going to be, at least one kid, probably loads, who are going to have seen Prodigy be in their like middle school, late elementary school science class or something, be learning about binary star systems and stuff like this, white dwarves, and they'll be like, man, this scene right here really stuck in my head, and like that's a real thing. I'm learning about that now. That's cool. And so I did like that it wasn't some crazy subspace anomaly. It was a really common. In fact, I think it's because red dwarf and white dwarf are gonna be very bright in this situation, and huge. But I think it might be one of, if not the more common white dwarf eating a star is a red dwarf, just because they're easier to see. Maybe don't quote me on that, but yeah, definitely real thing. Also part of the Lower Decks intro, but I think I was saying earlier, why does diverting all power, deactivate the brig and the emergency training hologram and the shield and the everything? It's like, well, it probably wouldn't. It's just every other time, Picard says that, you've got someone who actually knows what the heck they're doing, pressing all the buttons. And this guy was like, I don't know, just slap the console or something. Like, yeah, of course he's not going to do it the best way. Like, I could probably start... well, I was going to say I could probably start a nuclear submarine if I had to. Maybe not. I could probably start a nuclear submarine that had most of its basic functions automatically regulated by some sort of hologram. I would definitely damage, maybe not a nuclear submarine, but you get the point, some sort of big thing like that. I could start a 747 if I really tried. I just would probably damage the 747, not do it right, and make a lot of pilots very angry. But I could do it, sure. And then we get to this scene, which I think is just, well, first off, I don't think this was intended at all. But I think this is what I was saying with proving how complicated the starships are, is why the heck, first off, actually, vehicle replicator. I really like that idea, actually. But they're like, why is it still powered when you've transferred all the power? Well, again, you don't know what they're doing. There's probably like hey, there are no life pods, someone's trying to build a shuttlecraft or something, notification that pops up that, you could override that, but the Tellarite doesn't know what he's doing. Jenkum Pog, he says his name all the time. I should know it. So, like, yeah, it's working. But also, why is it allowed to build shuttlecraft when there's, like, life forms in its path? Well, all the power is being diverted, and it's a bunch of idiots running it. Like, I imagine it probably is cutting off, like, safeties, or they're not working at optimum efficiency, or, it's just not really working because idiots are running it. All the power's been diverted. And you may ask, why would the safeties shut off? Is like, a low power? And I'm like, you're watching Star Trek. That's what the safeties do. The safeties are designed to fail and be optional, really. Does it make sense? No. But is it Starfleet? Yeah. Yes. Annoyingly so, but yes. And it's kind of like, why is it building it? Like, clearly this is technology that is not working as it's supposed to. Probably because, again, all the computational power is being diverted to impulse or wherever. I like Janeway's bit at the end, though, where she's like, you really have potential. And I'm like, do they? Like, honestly, if you only saw the bits that Janeway saw, and I saw more, and I'm not... They have potential because it's a TV show, but, like... everyone's mad that, like, he's taking credit for everything, and they're like, we're screwed. They're clearly not getting on, and Jane was like, you've got potential. Yes, you needed me to do everything for you. Just even though I said I guided you, I really did everything. But you know what? You got potential. Sure, maybe Janeway's being a mother hen and stuff, but I say, Janeway, you should have stuck up for holographic rights and committed, not reset every episode, going back to the Doctor being a fancy tricorder, because now you gotta live with the consequences of your anti-holographic propaganda. And with that, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. I really should remember check out that Steven Universe thing you opened in a new tab. It's also probably right there.